One of the principles of a strong justice system is that it should stress the rule of law, not the rule of men. This means that concrete, predictable rules, such as those laid out in the U.S. Constitution, should take precedence over arbitrary whims of a single person. This principle is vital to the prevention of tyranny, but like anything else, it can be taken too far. Our framers understood the importance of balancing the need to punish criminals with the need to continue to treat them humanely. The Bill of Rights guaranteed the right to a trial by jury and protected against cruel and unusual punishment. Within this framework, judges were granted the authority to determine the appropriate punishment for guilty parties. Unfortunately, over time, the judicial discretion has been superseded by statutes that dictate punishments. When a set of laws becomes too rigid, failing to account for individual circumstance, injustice is invariably the result. No two crimes are identical. No two criminals are the same. These differences require some degree of judicial discretion to be dealt with fairly. This is why we have judges and juries, rather than mindless automata to enforce the country's laws. The human element is necessary to correct the errors that will inevitably result from laws that permit no exception. Those kind of laws have become increasingly common, with the advent of what are called mandatory minimum sentences. These laws dictate what kinds of sentences a judge can and cannot impose on lawbreakers. For example, current law prohibits a judge from handing out a sentence of less than 5 years in prison to a person convicted of a non-violent, drug-related offense. Mind you, this is only for the first offense, and the sentence requirements increase for each additional one thereafter. A much more rational approach would be to allow judges to evaluate each case individually and tailor sentencing decisions in a way that will be both fair and effective. Weldon Angelos was sentenced to 55 years in prison for 3 marijuana sales when he was just 24 years old. The 55-year sentence was required under federal mandatory minimum sentencing laws, because Weldon was in possession of a firearm, and each of the 3 sales was treated as a separate offense. The judge in this case, Paul Caswell, is now retired, but still regrets having to hand down such a harsh sentence to a non-violent criminal and thinks of Weldon to this day. Empirical research suggests that mandatory sentencing is not an effective way or an efficient way to deal with non-violent crime. Prisons have finite space and finite funding, and so determining the best use of these resources is important in addressing crime. According to an analysis by the RAND Corporation, one of the country's leading research institutions, it is more cost-effective to focus law enforcement efforts on a smaller number of serious offenders than to apply mandatory minimum sentences to every offender indiscriminately. On average, it costs $29,000 to keep one person in prison for 1 year. Imagine the good that could be done if that money were targeted at catching the worst of society's criminals, instead of being spent on non-violent offenders with a low chance of recidivism. The policy wastes money, and the resulting overcrowding of prisons prevents them from being used as intended, to house criminals who cannot be released into society. If judges are not permitted to use their discretion in matters of sentencing, there seems little point in having judges at all. Justice is blind, but that doesn't mean that our judges should be.